You are listening to an SAfm podcast, 104 to 107 nationwide. Stream us live on www.safm.co.za or via the SABC Plus app. SABC News, independent and impartial.
Hi, Bongiwe, Errol from Durban. And look, I still maintain that it's only a small amount of the churches in South Africa that are engaged with gender violence. I mean, these pastors should be taken to court to face the full might of the law.
All right, that is Errol in Durban there. Errol, thank you so much for getting us started in the conversation, right? As, Errol is expressing a concern that a very small amount of churches is getting involved in the fight against gender-based violence. So now, remember when, for a long time now, the church has been seen as a prominent institution, but over time we've also seen the church having a complex relationship, right, with violence against women and children. And in some cases you see the church contributing to it, and in some cases it's combating it. So it's called a source of healing and protection, and in some instances we've seen church leaders, structures perpetuating or enabling it, but in some cases you've seen leaders actually coming out to fight the scourge. So this morning we're asking you, right, how do you think that the church should actually add its voice in the fight against gender-based violence, and is it doing enough especially to do this? So to help us explore this very quickly, we've got Nataski Manyika, who's the author and founding editor of Christian Royalty magazine, and she's also the First Lady at Amazing Grace Center alongside Pastor Kennedy Manyika. Also joining us this morning is Reverend Mzwandile Molo, General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches. A very good morning to you, and thank you so much for your time. So I'm going to start with you, Nataski, because one of the things that we just heard now, even from one of our listeners, Errol, is that a very small amount of the church is actually getting involved in the fight against gender-based violence. And one would ask, right, how has the church been handling this issue?
Morning, Bongiwe, and morning to the listeners. Happy Women's Day to everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this issue. And as I just respond to the question you've put forward, the church has been mostly reactive, in my view. And I don't only speak as a pastor's wife, but also as a survivor and advocate, where gender-based violence is perpetrated, the church is usually sometimes very quiet. There are some churches that have been a refuge in times of tragedy, but mostly there's an overwhelming silence that comes out of the church. But thankfully, we have institutions as the SACC that are rising up and establishing programs and education and transformation through the church. But mostly, in my own view, the church has been very quiet. And also touching on what you just started off with, saying the church has also been complicit. When we see spiritual power abuse through the church, there's a story in Khayelitsha of a pastor who was using the term spiritual healing and sleeping with the vulnerable within the church, and those instances just put a dire shame upon the church as an institution that should stand for the truth, healing, and restoration. And rightly, as Errol said, I think we need to root out the rot amongst us in the church. Yeah.
Reverend Molo, I know, the SACC, for example, has really been quite vocal about some of the issues, including this one. But is the voice loud enough?
Good morning, Bongiwe, and good morning to my sister, and happy Women's Day to you all.
Thank you.
And all the women of South Africa. This is the truth, Bongiwe. In a fight like this, as long as it persists, the voice is not loud enough. And no matter what we can say we've done yesterday, no matter what we say we have done last month, the truth is too many of our women live in a dehumanizing manner, which is expressed most graphically in the violent acts that we see, which sometimes leads to murder. and rape. CCC, we believe that the root cause of this is a deep-seated patriarchal understanding of the world that we as the church have found a way to foster, if not bless. And therefore, if we are going to make any substantive change, we need firstly to accept as the church that for the last centuries or so, we have created an understanding that the woman is subservient, if not the property of man. And therefore, if we want to resolve this matter, we must change that teaching to help our people understand that women are as instrumental in the definition of what it is to be human in God's eyes as the men are. So that we do not start with Eve as if Eve is a consequence of Adam's loneliness. That we start with Eve as an imagination of God's own expression of who God is. And if we start there, then we are wanting to change the root cause of all these things. Because as we sit around right now, the world has, including the church understanding, has been that if you're a man, you almost have a right to come home earlier than your wife. And then sometimes when she comes back home, it is almost a right for you to have to say, what are we eating today? Although she is as tired as you are, if not worse than you, the expectation is still she is the one to serve you.
Yeah, and pardon me, Reverend Molo, for coming in there. Pardon me. Nataski, when you look at this, right, and you know, Reverend Molo talks about so many things that one would really want to follow up on, but is there a silencing of those who are experiencing, you know, these hardships within the church?
Yes, there is a silencing, and mostly it also stems from that fear of the shame, the fear of stigma or not being believed. As I mentioned earlier, as a survivor, when you want to start talking about these issues, some people start asking you or questioning the truth of what you're saying or bringing forward that this happened to me. And so there is still that prevalent silencing, and people in our communities, especially in the Black community, we shy away from these conversations. They're too awkward. They're too sensitive. We don't speak about such things. So there is a silencing that I have witnessed, but also in our times, people are being encouraged to speak up. We've seen the Me Too movement, the Church Too movement, but more rallying calls have to be made for women and any victim to be able to speak and know that I can be heard. Someone just wants to be heard sometimes. Hear me, believe me.
So Nataski, right there on that point, I want you to, if you can, speak to us about your own personal experience with this, right? That here you are, having gone through what you've gone through, then now, you know, you either reach out to the church or you reach out to people around you, particularly the church. Did you get any support at all?
Yes, I did. I did get some support, and I did get some people, again, as I said, who just said, you know, don't speak on these things. Keep them quiet, keep them mum, especially in my position as a lead, as a mum fundisi, you know. And people are like, it's too awkward. It's going to affect you in the wrong way. Don't speak on these issues. So we still have those mindsets, again, touching on what Reverend Molo is saying, that patriarchal institutionalism. And sometimes when you speak to these things, you make people feel uncomfortable because they start questioning themselves like, maybe I've done something that is not so right. So the conversations have to be made, and the light then drives out all forms of darkness. But someone has to stand up and say, no, the calls and the cries have to increase and get louder and louder. So everyone reflects, take a step back, look into yourself. What am I doing? What am I contributing? Am I supporting or am I blame shifting? Why does this conversation make me feel so uncomfortable? You know?
Rev, when, you know, because in some instances, the conversation can be seen as saying that it's men in the church who block women from speaking, but in some cases, even women themselves, like we just heard now, will say, don't talk, whoa, no, don't say anything. Where do we begin? I mean, you are a church leader yourself. How do you begin to change this mindset?
The first thing that we would like to say, at least as the SACC, we encourage our member churches to develop for themselves any sexual and violent protocols and policies that are victim sensitive, because it takes courage for anybody to stand up in a platform like the church, an institution that in many ways is one that's dominated by the idea that you are in the public. There are many people already. So how do we develop policies that are going to be sensitive to the victims? Secondly, we need to train our leaders to understand that when people come to tell their story, how best do we handle this? Because sometimes we as leaders want to follow the strict procedures that are there, which are almost kind of testing of truth and non-truth in a legalistic and very cold manner. And therefore, we need to make sure that our leaders have got a sensitivity that allows them to hear the stories. Thirdly, we need to work with women to say to women, answering your question directly, there is agency in being women that we and the world has not explored yet. And therefore, we need to say to women, they need to find their own voice and create space for that voice to be heard with respect, with honor, and embrace, so that women do not see themselves as defenders of the institution, whether it is family or whether it is church, but women who allow and see the institution as a place of deep exploration and healing of our contradictions as human beings. So that when women say, I am hurt, we don't start by saying, how do we defend the institution, whether it is our families or whether it is our churches, but how do we as women say to ourselves, let us listen with a deep sense of tenderness, and let us allow that motherly instinct that allows us to protect the child who cries out. When I grew up as a child, when I fall down, I don't call on my father. I say, Mama, because there's a deep connect there that allows me to know my mother will embrace me for the mere fact that I'm crying. My father is going to ask me, hey, and my mother is going to say, my mother is going to embrace me as a child. And after that, will say me, after she has kissed my bruise, she will say to me, and then I'll tell the story. And then if she believes I'm wrong, she'll go, but the instinct is to embrace and to hear my story. Those are the things that we need to bring back into who we are as church, and the women must feel in our presence, in our spaces.
So basically bring back Ubuntu. Because that is what would cause you to even want to reach out to the next person. Let me take a caller quickly. Sig in Randburg. Sig, good morning, briefly.
Good morning. Thank you very much. As we celebrate Women's Day today, I wonder whether anybody else was shocked by the news on our earliest headlines that a 4-year-old child has succumbed to the brutal injuries inflicted on her by her own father in her own home.
And Sig, to add there, right?
Occurrence and similar crimes on women and children have almost ceased to be news in the absence of law enforcement, from police headquarters down to the crime-ridden townships, where national police commissioners get away with drug peddling like Jackie Sulebe and with corruption like Becky Chede, who was promoted from police commissioner to minister of police by our ANC.
So Sig, pardon me for coming in there. Before you even go into the issues of corruption, you spoke about that 4-year-old story, right? It's not only the father, the mother needs to also account here, because she let that happen.
But we owe so much to my mothers, for example, who blessed my family with decent people. But we did that in law-enforced environments.
Yeah.
And we must get that to happen in what has become a gangster state. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sig. Thank you. Appreciate that. And Nataski, Sig speaks about a very distressing story, and this is a story of a 4-year-old who has been killed at the hands of the father, but also we've heard that the mother had to withdraw the case as well. That breaks one's heart, because you think that if a mother is going to also watch all of this happen, it boggles the mind.
Yeah, those issues boggle the mind. I was heartbroken when I heard the news at the top of the hour. And it comes down again to the church as well, having to take that forefront in teaching. When the nation, Esig, was saying people become lawless, and there are no safeguards, even in our homes, at schools, people just do what they want because they are not held to a higher accountability to God, who is our benchmark for our living. So it is a call and a cry to the church to really go out into the world, into our spaces, into our homes, into our communities, and reteach and reinforce the moral laws that God established. That a father, I was studying Ezekiel, and God abhors such violence when he's calling out men, that how can a man uncover the nakedness of his child, his sister? This is just, it's an abomination, and God stands against issues like this. So the church as well should constantly be speaking into these issues, so people are not, again, reactive, but to take a proactive stance to be able to teach people against violence, to teach people how to love each other, to teach people, mothers more so, and there's no reason to give justification. Some people might say it's because maybe she's in poverty, she depends on the husband. And again, it comes to empowering one another and upholding each other so that we have healthy relationships and our children are safe. Children need to be really safe.
Yeah. Rev?
The greatest betrayal of any society and of any family is when it betrays its own children. Because children are the most vulnerable, for they in totality depend on our love, sustenance, and protection. So when we receive stories like these that proliferate in our society, others get reported, others are not reported. We firstly must make the noise that we can to deal with it in the criminal sense of what it is. But we as the church must begin to say to ourselves, there is criminality which the law can deal with, but there's a moral fiber of society. There's the formation of what it is to be human. This basic understanding that says, I'm a human, you reference it, I'm a human because you are. Ubuntu. As a Christian, I'm a human being because I'm constructed and created in love, for loving. In other words, as a creation, I don't relate with God purely for my own sake. I relate to God so that God can re-inspire me to be a loving being that expresses my life in the world in a way that embraces everybody, especially the vulnerable and the weak, including of children. So Natasha is quite correct. We need to find a way to win back the moral struggle. We need to find a way to say to society, there is a better way to be. You cannot follow your animalistic instinct without regard to the consequences of those who are around you. That speaks to corruption, that speaks to violence, that speaks to rape, that speaks to this whole thing of seeing a 4-year-old child as an object of your own gratification and satisfying of edges that you should have better way to control. The mother, whatever consequences we need to find, we need to remind the mother that as God reminds us, there is no mother that is able to cease its love for its offspring. no matter what the circumstances. And part of loving is to embrace, part of loving is to protect, even at your own risk.
Yeah.
How then do we help as society? And maybe the last thing we need to talk about, what kind of communities are we building? Is it not time that every street, every block begins to ask the question, what kind of country do we want to be? What kind of society do we want to be? And I'm talking here even beyond your faith position, whatever faith you believe in. But there must be something basic that says to you, a child that walks in my street deserves to be protected. We grew up all in societies where when you walk down the streets, the uncle who was going to be near you will ask you lost. And if you say I'm lost, they would ask whose child are you? And when you give the answer, they don't point the direction, they walk with you and they take you home.
All right, let me thank you both for your time and happy Women's Day, Nataski. Thank you so much for waking up with us. Thank you to you both and really for just talking about this conversation. That was Nataski Manyika, author and founding editor of Christian Royalty magazine and First Lady at Amazing Grace Center, alongside Pastor Kennedy Manyika and Reverend Mzwandile Molo, General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches.
You can find SAfm Current Affairs on 104 to 107 nationwide. Our podcasts are available for download on all our digital platforms. SAfm, leading the conversation.